Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. How are you? Just let me know that you can hear me okay, see me okay, all that stuff. Let me see who's here. Good morning. Oh, Kira, I have to give you an answer. I'll do that in a couple of minutes. Um, Running a little bit behind this morning, but good to see you, Kira. Good to see you, Christine. Joelle, good morning. Karen, good morning in Kentucky. Christine M, so windy this morning. Oh my gosh, poor mini schnauzer. They are the cutest little things. We have a schnauzer next door called Hans, and he's Button's favorite pal. He is a really stout little body, sweet little cute thing. I love schnauzers. Good morning, Linda B. You're hooking while you're waiting. That's perfect. Oh, you're hooking too. That's perfect. Jennifer, good morning. Happy Monday. Oh, Penny, good morning. Catherine, good morning. Mom, good morning. We had such a good time, didn't we? Good morning, Karen from gloomy Connecticut. It is a bit. It's supposed to be in the, I thought, high 40s today, but with the gloom, it really takes away from the mild temperature. What we need is the sun. I'll take a bright winter sun anytime. Good morning, Doreen. Good morning, Julie. Looks like everybody's here. Just let me know if there's any issue with my sound because I feel like I have a good show for you and I don't want it to be ruined by that or by sound and pixelation. It might be ruined by this. I know we are past Christmas now, and I'm not feeling particularly festive. I'm feeling like I'm catching up like crazy. But since this sweater came after Christmas, I felt compelled to wear it. So here it is, a homemade sweater that I found on Facebook. I actually love it, and it's cotton, so I don't have to worry about it being moth-eaten by by next year. I bet half of you could knit this as well as this. I just thought it was super cute. All the presents with the bows sticking up. Wish it would have come in time for our musical bingo, but it didn't. So listen, news first. So let's do our news first. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. I hope you had a nice quiet time yesterday. It was only that one day in between. Isn't that crazy? So, listen, I don't want to disappoint you, but I think I'm going to, after today's episode, which will probably be on the long side, I'm going to take a couple of days off and come back to you on New Year's Day. And I love you and I will miss you, but having this in the middle of the day has been hard because I've got like a third of my stuff over at the new workplace, and I can't seem to get traction with driving back and forth. And now I'm in this crazy state of where's that thing, which you know how much I love that. Still haven't found what I'm looking for. Saga, that soundtrack that runs through my life. I need to get sort of situated and get things set. So I'm going to do this episode of Coffee Time, and then I'm going to come back to you on New Year's Day, which I think is Friday, with totally permanent and normal and regular episodes right through the year. I just need to catch my breath a little bit. Thank you. I appreciate it because I love coming on and seeing you, but then I have to plan where I'll be. And if you remember when I did the show, the only time at my new workplace, the picture wasn't good. So Joe, one of the members of the Facebook group, wrote and said, try an Ethernet. I got a lot of information and I've been reading a lot of articles on changing settings for different places and different speeds. And it's all so bewildering and boring. It's hard to stick with it. So I'm going to try a couple different things this afternoon there. And then by Friday, I feel like I am sure that I can come back to you with really high quality because I feel like the shows are pretty good and I want the quality to be pretty good too. Okay, great. Thank you so much. You're so good. And you know what else happened? I have to tell you, and I have to be careful about what I say. I must be such a proper ding dong because when I ran that bingo game, our musical bingo, with my mom and my sister the other night, which was so fun, I ended up getting one email the next morning. And how did I not predict and foresee this problem using music, right? There's supposed to be a minimum of someone's song that you can play before you get into trouble. And I wouldn't say I got into trouble, but I got a message that one of the artists, and I will just say saxophone, like solo saxophone, Auld Lang Syne, I got into trouble with their company. Not trouble, but they wrote and they said, we detected our song in your show, even though it was on for about literally 2 to 3 seconds, with talking over it. And we are clamping like our royalties on this because YouTube, with this many followers, this many people tuning in, thank you. They do pay me. It's not huge amounts, but it's little amounts for doing coffee time and doing all of my videos. So he would then get all of the royalties for the show that I worked, I don't know, 10 hours on. So that really irritated me. And I ended up cutting out that one little thing from that show so that they back it up with that. But how did I not know that that was going to happen? What a stoopy stuperson coming to you. I know. What a world, you know, what a world. Because I was also advertising for all of those people. I pulled up that Spotify list that my sister made after, and I enjoyed it for yesterday and the night after we logged off. Congratulations to the winners. If you have any questions, let me know. Redeem your stuff whenever. You know, you're all good. You're all good with me. It doesn't have to be like immediate. Thanks, Julie. I felt like I probably should have known, but I figured small snippets while we're talking would not be like a super criminal assumption. But anyway, it was fine. It was fine. It was just super irritating. It's one of those things. I hope that 2021 is less draining and irritating. And I know you do too. And it will be, because we'll stick together. And, you know, one thing I'll say is that things the way they are right now, not so great, but a lot of promise for the future. And I am going to assume that in 2021, we get back on track with being able to do things very carefully, probably still, you know, covered up and all. But I am going to plan some things for like later in the spring for this year. I know for people that live around here, it's easy to get together, but I am going to plan like some events, some little tours, some rug hooking related things to do and go see, and little day trips with transportation and all that. I'm going to go ahead and plan things as if the world will be normal sooner rather than later. So just be thinking about that. And I even took out my book, which I love. It's called Little by Little. It's the collection of the Littles. It's written by Nina Fletcher Little at Cogswell Grant. Now, this is one of the great folk art houses of all time. I will, Julie. I promise I will. And we'll travel all over the place. You know, I'm going to start moving around more when life is a little more stable and predictable. So, thanks. Definitely thumbs up. But this is the house, one of the two houses very close to each other that have huge rug and folk art collections, particularly rug. So I'm going to get back in touch with them because our group did have plans to go there this past summer. And of course, they got canceled. So I can't even say postponed because it's like canceled. So I'm going to start doing that stuff again. We all need stuff to look forward to. I will always take a camera. And now I'm working on my phone, figuring out how I can do live shows, really good live shows in other places. So I can go to places like that and say, let us see your rugs. We all want to look. We all want to see. We'll be doing lots of that in the new year. So we can, if we're not going to be together because of location, we're going to travel on the magic bus. Good one, Caprice. Caprice, your thing should be coming today. I hope you got my message. Thank you, Catherine. So listen, so much stuff. I'm going to run over today, so just know it. I've been working on the Amish design is coming. That's my project for this afternoon, this evening when I settle down again. The Amish quilt pattern, you know, with the two skaters in the middle is going to be, I think, my best pattern. I absolutely love it. But in the meantime, I could not help myself. I had to do another primitive. I'm going to do one primitive a month that's like 12 by 12 for beginners or for anybody who likes the design. I had to do the tomato, and I have to say, I love this tomato so much. I'm only partway done. Let's see. I haven't obviously blocked it or anything like that yet, but it's like an inner picture with a tomato. I might pop the head of the tomato, the little leafy part, and I've got my metallic stick pins in that in person look quite realistic. They could actually be stick pins from a distance. They're very, very, very metallic. This light color here, and then there's kind of like the vine thing going around. And then I'm using tons of different plaids in the corners. I put two heart-shaped, because these are like a bleeding heart-shaped clover things. But I put two in pink, which is optional. But I really like it because I've always been a hand sewer too. And I know a lot of you are. So I really liked that. I just wanted to show you, assuming I'm not pixelated, some of the colors for that. So I'm going to be putting this out as a kit probably this afternoon. These look so drab compared to the real colors. This is like a proper red, orange, tomato, yellow. This, I'm going to put some fuchsia. This isn't the kit. This is just ones I had in the bag from doing this. But I did the fuchsia for the hearts, if that's an optional. And then there's lots of like soft blues, like a cornflower blue, like a purpley blue, going into all shades of green. And then I have, if you're getting the kit, tons and tons of plaids, all different ones that are over dyed too. That one's over dyed like a green. That one's over dyed more of a turquoise. And it's fun plugging the plaids into the background because you do as you do. I've got outside of this sort of circle, it's going to get darker and darker as I go out to the edges. So you do as you do, and you put the colors where you like the colors and all that. And all the kits will come with, I have more colors than this. You know, this felt back metallic stuff already cut for you to a 3 because the 3 worked great for the silver stick, and the head will be strips of 8s because one loop of an 8 worked great for the tops of the pins. Now, what I did with the tops of the pins, you know, I got to be me, you got to be you, and I got to be me. I left the tails underneath. And you know what happened when I left the tails underneath instead of on top? Nothing. The police didn't knock the door down, Christmas Vacation style. I don't think that Athos canceled my subscription or membership. Rug Hooking Magazine hasn't subpoenaed me or anything. Nothing happened. It's just, it looks better, those little foil bits with the tails down. It doesn't look ratty. It looks really crisp and good. So I left the tails down because when it makes sense, I do leave the tails down when it makes sense. So there we go. Now today, so the Amish design is coming. And I wanted to show you the tomato design because I'm really loving it. And I wanted to show you that I have started my collection of, thank you. I know I'll get blasted, Catherine. I know it. I want to show you my growing collection of these little pincushions, right? Now, who hasn't seen, these are old, this one's old. This one's like a stout one. You can see it's different than the others. This is a more traditional, but it's still an older one. And this one's a bit more stout. Now, what is so special about these? Partly that they signify handcrafts, right? I mean, there's nobody on earth who hasn't seen a tomato pincushion, right? So it got me thinking about this design because I don't know why I wanted to do a tomato pincushion. It was just in my head and it had to come out in a healthy way. So I did the tomato pincushion and I love the way it's working. I'm going to make a nice vignette with those in front of there, and I am going to continue my collection because now there's like purple ones and blue ones too, but the older ones are quite nice, and these are older ones. Now, what is the thing about tomato pincushions? Before I get into the segment on rugs with Calder, and by the way, I have not forgotten to wrap up the Waldoboro segment. I just cannot find those 2 books. This is the symptom of being in too many places. I cannot find those 2 books, so I will Waldoboro it when we get back together in the new year. But what is it about the tomato pincushion? Why is it always a tomato? Doesn't it seem, and some of you might know this story, your grandmother had one. Kirsten says her grandmother had one. That is so funny. Oh, that is so funny. Oh, the pixelation's starting. Great. Well, I will talk for now, and let's see if it goes away before I need to show you some amazing pictures. So I looked up tomato pincushion on the internet to find out what I could find out about while I was working on this piece here. And I found a beautiful article on the Martha Stewart website. We all know Martha Stewart, of course. I think she's loaded with great ideas, or at least the people who work for her are. Really insightful, interesting, high-quality projects and ideas. This was one of the great articles on her website, which is endless. So the name of the article, so this is www. I'm going to be paraphrasing, marthastewart.com, mystery tomato pincushion, one word. Pincushions, one word. So again, I'm paraphrasing, but the article goes along these lines. What's red and ripe and bursting at the seams with sewing pins? That enduring icon of the needlework world, the produce-inspired pincushion, better known as the tomato pincushion. I will. I'm trying to upgrade it. I have the most expensive speed I can have, and it's costing like hundreds of dollars a month. But for some reason, I cannot get the settings right. So hopefully on Friday, I will have time to figure out what's wrong with that. And I'm also trying to attach an Ethernet cord, but I'm doing the best I can to get it up and running because these shows are half of my day. So it's important to me too to get the visuals well. So the tomato pincushion, if you grew up in a crafty household like I did, the odds are you've seen it before. I think we've all seen it before. The enduring icon is either in your mother's sewing box or tucked away in a drawer among a pile of unraveling spools. Isn't that true? But did you ever stop to wonder where this little oddity comes from? In other words, why is it a tomato and why does everybody have one? Why is it such an iconic thing? The first, why tomatoes of all things? It turns out it's not random. There's a story here. There's actually a reason for the tomato design, and it dates back to the Victorian era, as so many things do, right? The first ever documented mention of the generic pincushion dates back to the Middle Ages. So pincushions go way back. Of course, in those days, they were more whimsically called PIM, P-I-M pillows with an E-S, or pin, P-Y-N pillows, and also pin poppets, like pin dolls. The pincushion was invented as a practical aid for storing pins and needles, but it also showcased one's collections of pins and needles. Because remember, pins were expensive and valuable. Having pins was like a status symbol. Pins were expensive for many, many, many years. Not so much now, but they were costly back in the day. Enter the time-honored tomato. According to tradition, placing a tomato on your mantle, particularly of a new home, ensured prosperity and warded off evil. So, like so many things, superstition, right? The pincushion is based in superstition. Don't start buttons. When tomatoes were out of season, people couldn't put them on their mantle. So this posed a problem. You would be worried that evil spirits would come into your house. So instead of worrying about not having a tomato, women would sew tomatoes, right? The next best thing. So women would sew tomatoes out of red material and fill them with sawdust and put those on the mantle. And that is the beginning of the tomato pincushion. So a lady of the Victorian era would take immense pride in the parlor or in a room where she would host company in stocking the shelves with as many pincushions as possible. And we see this with those both German and Japan pincushion dolls with the pincushion skirt bottoms. But the tomato was always the crown jewel of anybody's collection. And of course, not just, in the earlier period when putting any pins in it would have been some kind of a status symbol because of the cost of pins. But in the Victorian period, you could put your sewing pins into your tomato, but you could also put like your hat pins into your tomato. And all of those were extreme luxury items too, depending on how many pearls and things you had on your pins, but all sticking out of a tomato on the mantelpiece. And that is the reason why the tomato is still with us. More than 100 years later, we're still using a tomato, and we're not even maybe realizing that it is a good luck symbol, and it has saved us from evil spirits. So that is good to know, right? Now, how are we doing with the picture at this point? Because I'm about to launch into some commentary that will include pictures. Am I doing sort of okay with pixelation? My sweater's not helping, I'm sure. So I wanted to talk today about, moving on from the tomato pincushion, about Alexander Calder. Now, this is a name that maybe you don't know as well as, for example, Andy Warhol or other sort of pop artists, 20th century artists. Pretty okay. Let's see how it goes. I can always post stuff on the Facebook group, Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. I can post photos there too. But Alexander Calder lived in Connecticut, so he's a bit dear to my heart. He lived in the town of Roxbury, Connecticut. And I got to know, not him personally, but he's a little later than mid-century, like 60s, 70s. That's kind of his window. Because he's from Connecticut, people in Connecticut tend to know the name pretty readily. So he's an expressionist artist who is kind of in the style of like Matisse, very blocky images. I'll show you some of his rugs to show you in a minute. He was best known for his mobiles, which would hang, or his stabiles, which Stamobile, which were standing mobiles. And they would be footed with some kind of an animal or shape. Very, very, very unusual, very abstract. He sometimes used figural, mostly animals, like monster-looking things too, but very, very abstract and shape-driven. So he's an interesting character. He's in Connecticut. He bought this beautiful farmhouse, and one of the best-known stories about him now, in terms of his work, is that he built a lot of his famous mobiles and stabiles outside in his yard. And the person who bought his house after his death, apparently, I heard this from the art teacher at the elementary school, because we did a big segment when I was volunteering at the elementary school on Calder. And I built a lot of stabiles that were like based on his, and some stuff based on his circus work. He did a lot of circus images, that I like cut out the hole and the kids would put their face through. A lot of his images I used, probably 5 or 6 things of Calder's I built and reproduced to use at the elementary school. But the teacher there told me that people who love Calder often try to get to the house that is now owned by someone else because there's a lot of art in the backyard. And apparently the person who owns it now is not happy about this. He does not care about Calder and people wanting to see the stuff in the backyard. It's just stuff in the backyard to him, which is a terrible shame because, of course, we have a collection of work locally that should be in a museum, and instead it's outside and it can't be seen by the public. Super frustrating, but that's just the way life is. Calder is a really interesting character, very good, nice person, really devoted and committed to art. And although he is known for doing everything, the years of his life, just to frame him up, are 1898 to 1976. I'm pulling a lot of information here from a great article online that came from a website called www.valuethoughts.com. That tells you already it's going to be worth checking out and browsing. And this article, if you put it into your browser, is called All Calder Tapestries Are Not Equal. And that is the theme of the article on that site. So Calder, 1898 to 1976, best known for his stabiles, and hanging mobiles. He worked in every medium imaginable. He was a painter. He was a printmaker. He made jewelry. He made stage sets. He made wire sculpture. He made decorated airplanes, like actual airplanes. He did everything. He was curious and interested in everything. He was one of those great souls who crossed over into everything, like a modern Leonardo, really a tinkerer with all things. Beginning in the 1960s, I'm paraphrasing here, Calder aligned himself with important French weavers. So he's already a quite well-known artist, but he gets involved in textile art, and this is where it crosses with our interests. He aligns himself with weavers like Pinton, people who are manufacturing very high quality, limited edition tapestries. So he gets into this world as well, the textile world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about his tapestries. Even though he's a modern artist, right? I mean, he died in the 70s. It's still hard to pinpoint and nail down some of his work, right? It's not all accounted for. It's very problematic using the word tapestry versus tapis, T-A-P-I-S, in catalogs, because a lot of the stuff went international, was made in other countries. Tapis and tapestry cross over. There's problems with determining through auction catalogs and trying to retrace his work, particularly his rugs, what things were actual carpets that went on the floor and what things were under the category of tapis that would be actually a tapestry and on the wall. It sounds like it would be very straightforward, but it's not when you get a picture this big in an auction catalog. It becomes very confusing if you're looking at a rug, a wall piece of tapestry, or something made in a different way. And this is what I mean by that. So some dealers are now asking over $100,000 for Calder Aubusson style tapestries. So in other words, his textile work sells very well. If you want a textile of Calder's, you could be looking at the $100,000 mark. So again, all limited edition, all numbered, not all accounted for. So they can be found for less. You can be lucky. Of course, we know these stories of people finding the most outrageous things at Goodwill. I'm not even going to start thinking about that because I'll start getting stomach cramps. But he usually did about, for his Aubusson style tapestries, he did a series of 60. So that's very limited edition. And this author of this article in Value Thoughts is saying there is still a lot of confusion about his lesser known medium, so not the tapestries. And he talks about the problem with the word tapestry, and particularly in the 70s and 80s, what they would write in an auction catalog, whatever word they chose, tapis, tapestry, sissel rug, jute rug, all confusing because sometimes they weren't calling the thing by the right name anyway. And then the person buys something and receives something that's not at all what they were expecting. So I'm going to show you what some of his work looks like, but just clock in your mind that there are 5 different categories of Calder's textile pieces. And one is the Aubusson, so there's like a series of 60 of those. The number 2 category is the bicentennial Aubussons, which are completely different. Number 3 is the natural fiber wall hangings, which were often used on the floor. And the 4th category is pile rugs and carpets. Those will include hooked rugs. And number 5 is problematic items, which people cannot classify because of confusion over the years. So, for example, let me show you an example of one of his rugs. This is one of the Aubusson. Now, this is probably going to get the pixelation crazy. This is an example of an Aubusson carpet. So this has a pile to it. This is an example of an Aubusson rug that's actually made from a material that we would now call sissel, jute. It's raised. It's like a trivet. It's like a straw trivet. These two things in a black and white catalog both look like the same thing, right? So this one is very valuable, but this one's actually more valuable by about $10,000. So this is more like a $50,000 item, the jute or sissel mat, just because of scarcity. So it has been a thing with Calder through the years when you're looking at black and white auction catalogs trying to snap up his work, which is limited. This looks like the same piece. And if you've seen this piece in the past or you're aware of this piece pops up, you're going to buy this piece by accident. It happened to somebody. They bought this piece by accident, but this piece is worth more. So it turned out to be okay. This is the kind of thing that's happening with his work. It's very graphic, as you can see. That's upside down, but it's very graphic. So let's see. Some confusion when people talk about the Calder tapestries comes from a series of mats that were created as part, now you're going to love this part, as part of a charitable relief program to help victims of the devastating 1972 earthquake in Nicaragua. So he was very interested in causes too, which makes him very likable. Kitty Meyer, a New York socialite, had brought a Calder, brought Calder a thank you gift of a hammock braided by the artisans of a village in Masaya, employing a centuries-old technique. So this is going to really turn him on to textiles in the first place. So the material used was a fine wool employed by the ateliers in Aubusson and other like tapestry centers, industries. But it wasn't made of the coarse material you would expect a hammock to be made from. It was made of vegetable fibers and wool, stuff that was spun. So this really piqued and initiated his interest in doing something that was more, for example, like a hooked rug, more of a pile style carpet. So the material he ended up working with, because what he did, he was intrigued by the hammock and he wanted to turn some of his work into rug/tapestries, wall or floor. And he wanted to use materials that were affordable as a relief program for the people of Nicaragua. So he ended up buying jute, hemp, raffia, and rope, tons of it. This is where we're going to get this series, right? This more sissel type rug series. And what he does is he agrees to let the artisans of Nicaragua and Guatemala execute 14 of his designs. And he actually pays the craftspeople to make them, and he gives them all of the materials for free. So this is his way of employing people, giving them all the materials, giving them the rights to his work to be able to do whatever designs of the, 14, they can just make them and sell them and keep the money from it. So this was a really nice effort in 1972 on his part. It will create a lot of rugs that will later become confusing, right? Because these rugs are made in Guatemala and Nicaragua. This will add to some of the confusion later in auction catalogs, but this is just a moment of time. So let's see, let's take a look below. I want to show you some of his, by the way, the top rug is called Ceylon Noir. And this one is called Zebra. So even though they look like the same thing, they're not the same thing. Calder would know, but of course he's passed away. So it's very hard tracking his work. This has been a hard episode to put together, but it's going to become more interesting in a minute. So getting into his hooked stuff, because I know that's probably where your interest is going to lie. I want to show you something else that he did too that's just going to blow your mind. There's going to be more confusion when we get into his hooked rugs, and I'll tell you why. I want to show you some of his hooked rugs first. So let's look at some of these together. I'm saving one of them because it has its own story. This probably reminds you of a lot of mid-century artists, but this is Calder all the way. Again, it's very shape-driven. It's very of its time. These are hooked rugs that we're looking at. And again, some of these patterns were used to make sissel rugs because of the relief effort in 1972 for the earthquake. Some of these you will see if you search. They're not currently online, but if you make it your business to search for Calder, you will see some of these designs coming up also as sissel rugs from that time. At least you'll know when, right? So this is actually a sissel rug. And this is it close up. So if you don't know what I mean by jute or sissel, it's this kind, it's a pile, but of straw, not of wool or vegetable material or anything. It's like a straw-based, jute-based, or rope-based backing. And it's colored, and you're doing it with the color. You're not adding the color later. It's going to be a different style of rug. These are two of the same hooked rug. And I'm going to link this in 2 minutes when you see what we're going to get to next. They're different, right, Joelle? I mean, they're really different. They're very modern. We've got something that looks like a turnip, something that looks like a monster, some galaxy stuff, kind of a snowflake, some swirls. Very, very, very different. He was very generous with the rights to his stuff, and we will get a lot of crossover stuff. Let me show you one more, and then I want to talk more specifically about a really neat story. So this is what his work looks like. You maybe think of Mondrian, like with the red, white, and blue, the primaries. Maybe you think of Matisse, you know, his women in gardens, or maybe Icarus and the sun, you know, similar colors, similar shapes. So in terms of hooked rugs, there are Calder hooked rugs out there. Now, it would be, to say the least, a boon to find one. In the book Calder's Universe, which was published in conjunction with the Whitney Museum's 1976 Calder retrospective, several rugs, so that's the year that he dies, several rugs are pictured, some are hooked, and they are hooked by his wife, Louisa Calder. So isn't that in itself interesting? He's not hooking rugs, but his wife is, hooking his designs into rugs. And other apparent friends of the family. Now, this was like a rabbit hole that I went down and I got the answer to, so let's hold on that for a minute. These are identified as being the hooked rugs we're talking about, never for sale, for personal use only. The biggest problems come, again, problematic identifying of Calder work, come from items that were created without permission. So he gave a lot of people permission to do his work. He was extremely generous, but a lot of the hooked rugs were hooked without permission. And this is often done innocently because people don't understand copyright. It is often done because somebody sitting in their living room in some place thinks, oh, that is so modern and different. I love it. It would be wonderful to hook this. What a great pattern to hook. By the way, side note, Calder is under copyright, completely locked up. So you know how that works. But some people over the years haven't, and they have created Calders that were not okay to find on the marketplace. So that in itself is a problem. And then there is this problem. I'm going to tell you really specifically about this problem because, you know, it's so silly to talk about problems, and I hate copyright in general. But this rug was the first Calder rug that popped up when I searched. This is a hooked rug. So this is hooked by Louisa, and it says AC. They did the thing backwards. That was just the way they signed it. So this is hooked by his wife. And it's his design, obviously. She hooked it in front of him. So this rug is very prominent on the internet. I couldn't find anything about this rug. I couldn't find it. This was a Pinterest image. I couldn't find anything other than his wife hooked it, and he was an expressionist, and that's the end of that. And then I did finally find it. Something popped up, an article from 1970. Oh, shoot, I didn't write it down. I think it was actually the late 1960s. I'll add it to the post when I put it up. It's on my phone, but I shut my phone off. So there was an article written in a local newspaper, and it was written by Rita Reef. It was just a fluke that I managed to find this article. I went so deep into the rabbit hole. It was eventually there. I'm just going to read you parts of it because it's just so incredible how we get from this and getting sort of in trouble with designs. And then we find the answer to probably the biggest source of our problems with Calder hooked rugs. So in this article by Rita Reef, she says, the solution to a problem facing Mr. and Mrs. Rufus C. Stillman 2 years ago led to the current exhibition of hand-hooked rugs designed by the artists at the Stephen Radich Gallery. This is on Madison Avenue in New York City. So this is a New York City paper. We are building our second Marcel Brewer house, Mrs. Stillman explained this week, adding that the Litchfield house in Connecticut still needed rugs, and that she and her husband were game to make rugs to fill it. So in other words, we are talking about socialites who would like to have some modern rugs in their house, and they are willing to make the rugs. So here's what happens next. The Stillmans, and it says in parentheses, he is the vice president of the Torrington Manufacturing Company, makers of moving air equipment, so like heating and air conditioning units, probably quite wealthy, we're guessing, by the context, approached his friends. And his friend is Alexander Calder, the artist, and his wife, Louisa, for assistance with these rugs, the lack of rugs. So Sandy is the daughter, is the Calder's daughter, gave us 2 designs, Mrs. Stillman said, and we each made half of each. So in other words, Mr. and Mrs. Stillman have funds. They have a beautiful house in Litchfield. They're building a second house, and they would like some modern rugs. So they approach Alexander Calder, and his daughter comes forward with 2 designs. And Mr. Stillman hooks half of each of the 2, and Mrs. Stillman hooks the other half. So both of the Calder designs that they initially hook are 50-50 projects for their home, for personal use. So this is okay. So the rugs which the Stillmans hang on the walls in their home are intended for the floor. One day, the couple may choose to put them on the floor. As amateurs at hooking, the Stillmans fared well, but did have some instruction. Mrs. Stillman said from the, it's hard to read this because it's an old paper, sculptor's wife. So Mrs. Stillman was aided by Louisa in how to hook a rug, right? His wife. I mean, this is just so interesting to me that it's like this close to home. Both Calder designs, which look like flattened mobiles. In other words, they have no familiarity with hooked rugs. And to them, this looks like a mobile hanging from the ceiling with shapes that's been flattened. There's no other way to put it in context because they have no starting point within visualizing a hooked rug. So these look like flattened mobiles. Took a year to complete, just long enough for an idea to germinate. Here's the idea. Mrs. Stillman said that the couple decided that other artists might enjoy designing rugs, that many people might like to hook them, make them, and have them. Uh-oh. So we started talking to our friends. Now, again, these would be friends of the Stillmans who would be in a certain circle. And the friends agreed to join the scheme. In addition to Mr. Calder and the architects, Marcel Brewer, she names a ton of people who get involved in rug making at this point. So in other words, I'm not going to read the whole article. In other words, what is happening is that the Stillmans are friends with the Calders. Louisa Calder, the daughter, Sandy or Sandra Calder, comes forward with some of her dad's designs. And as friends, Louisa, the wife, is helping to hook and showing how to hook the rugs. And the Stillmans are making rugs for their home. And now they're inviting all of their society friends to also make rugs. And maybe other artists are designing the rugs, maybe not. But at this point, it sounds like, based on this article, a lot of people are hooking Calder's rugs. The question will come up in history, if it hasn't already, how many of these rugs does Calder actually know about? It sounds like a bit of a socialite hooking bee at this point, which is super quaint, and I wish I was there. But you can see how something like this could create problems 20 years later in auction galleries when people are buying rugs because they don't want to buy a rug that they think is hooked by Louisa Calder and is actually hooked by Mrs. Stillman or one of her friends. So as the story goes on, she says, possibly the 2 most striking rugs. Now, this is Rita talking, who wrote this article, and she is talking about an exhibit of rugs in the late 60s that include the Calder rugs. Possibly 2 of the most striking rugs, which small children and their mothers gravitate toward in the gallery, are this rug and another one which I don't have a picture of. And if I find it, I will let you know. Amanda, I will show you my frame after I build it. This kind of work with a rug tufting gun is perfect. These kinds of shape-driven things that Calder did, if you have a rug tufting gun, I'm not saying do Calder's designs. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying something that stylistically looks similar to this. It's very simple in line, really is really good with a tufting gun. I'll get back to you on the tufting gun this week. But in any case, this is a bit of a free-for-all. And people are describing that. I'm looking at the end of the article, describing this selection of hooked rugs as being very cubist, which they're really not. They're quite flat. They mean expressionist, but they don't have the word for it yet. But yeah, this is the most popular one for sure. Calder's Snake and Raccoon, Sun with a Winking Eye, and Half Moon. Very, very, very popular rug in that exhibit. The largest rugs are 7-foot squares, and are costing in this gallery show in the late 60s $1,500. The smaller rugs are starting at 300, which any of these rugs obviously would have been a very good investment at that time. And it ran through December 10th. I want to say this was 1967. I'm pretty good with having a photographic sort of memory. I'm pretty sure this is a 1967 article, but I'll include it in the end of the coffee time thing. So I want to move on to one more thing before I close about Calder, because now we've seen some of his rugs. We've heard about where the problems can come from when people are buying rugs years later and you're trying to figure out who made them and what the provenance is. I just think it is so funny that this socialite, Mrs. Stillman, was having a 1960s hooking bee in their obviously over-the-top Litchfield house to make rugs to populate their second house and getting other socialite people involved. I just think, what a moment in time, right? But I wanted to tell you just one other thing that I think is really interesting about Calder, because he himself is such an interesting person. And as I said at the beginning of the episode, a proper tinkerer. And I always respect people who tinker. I think it's such a thing to have that kind of, again, Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Edison, Ben Franklin, that kind of mind that tinkers and takes things apart and puts them back together and finds shortcuts. Thanks, Kira. So I want to close this episode just with Calder, because I want to leave you not just with his very graphic art and with the funny story about people hooking his rugs, but with who he was and what he did and what he was like as a person. So in September of 1933, Calder and his wife Louisa purchased this Roxbury house in Connecticut. It's in the very northwest of Connecticut. And it's a 1760 farmhouse. And they lived there like forever. So he was doing his sculpting there. He was doing his painting there. It had 18 acres, and he ended up doing a lot of his sculpture, as we know, and leaving it in the backyard. And a lot of it is still there. And unfortunately, we can't see it at the moment. We'll see what happens. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's a massive expanse of property. And the first sculpture, what happened when he moved out of a city situation into this big farmhouse was that his mind opened up, and he realized he could do sculpture, and he could do sculpture outside, and he could leave it outside. And the first piece of sculpture that he did, that he put outside and left outside, is this piece that, thank goodness, has traveled the world in museums all through the middle of the 20th century and is safe in a museum. It is not outside. This is called the Apple Monster. And he made this out of an ancient log or branch that he found in the backyard. And, it stood up in the yard, and he had it touring literally through the world. Every capital city that you can think of, every art center that you can think of, it's been there. This is the Apple Monster. So that was the first time that he realized the world is his oyster, right? He's just going to start making three-dimensional work like crazy. He has a real sort of penchant for doing it too. He is doing this stuff outside of the house, but inside of the house, he is tinkering. And he's tinkering with the most extraordinary things. I want to show you some of them, and I don't want to leave any out. Wait till you see the things he was playing with inside of his house, besides the rugs, besides the sculpture. There is an article on www.wallpaper.com by Jessica. This is a tough one. Get ready. Klingelfuss. 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 And it's called At Home with Calder, the artist's hidden knack for domestic design. Now, he doesn't mean to be a domestic designer. He tinkers, and this is some of the stuff he comes up with. So if you go to that page after this episode, you will find some of the extraordinary stuff that he made while he was fooling around in his house. Let me show you. Hold on one second. I got myself jumbled up here. I don't want to miss. Here it is. The chess set that he made. So this is a pretty straightforward one, but he made this. Now, super sort of mid-century style, right? Nothing to do with rug hooking, but super mid-century style. This is his chess set from 1933. He made it with wood and he painted it. just different, just different. This has traveled a lot in terms of exhibits and stuff too. Then he moved on to make a dinner bell. And when he made this dinner bell, what happened was they had friends over, Louisa and he had friends over, and he had this beautiful Mexican goblet, and somebody dropped it and it broke. And looking at a rug by a famous rug hooker, the important thing to look for their signature. Kira, it is the important thing to look for their signatures. So the problem with that is not everybody signs their rugs. And that's just not us nowadays always getting slapped on the hand or face for not signing our rugs. Through time, people have not signed their work. Calder is notorious for not signing his work. So if you look at these two, these are both Calders, and they're probably hooked by Louisa, both of them, but they're not signed. She does sign other things, but it's not consistent. If you're looking to collect, you have to, if you're looking through auction catalogs, you will find in stacks at antique stores. You look for a certain thing. Like I was out antiquing yesterday. I was looking for folk art catalogs because I'm always looking to pull up rugs to show you that are one of a kinds, that can fill gaps in what we know about rug hooking. We say, this is another one of this style. I wonder if it's by the same person from the same place. But if you were looking for Calders, for example, particularly his rugs, you would be looking at every past auction catalog you could get from like mid-century modern. So expressionism, things like this. You would be looking for these taglines on eBay or in shops, and you would be looking at past rugs that have come and gone, passed through people's hands, because the internet is not good for Calder rugs. And if you were looking particularly for Calder, like I'm looking for Molly Naitobi, right? And I know how she signed her rugs. I know what her signature looks like. And I would never be able to push a rug off as, on the book I'm working on, or even showing you at coffee time, as a Toby rug if I didn't see her signature on it, because you just, without provenance, you can't. I could with the Mickey Mouse rug I showed you because I know who it belonged to and I know who it was made for, and that whole thing is set. But yeah, it's super important if you're making a big investment to know that the rug has provenance. And the auction houses are supposed to do this for you. That's why they charge the crazy exorbitant fee on behalf of the person who's selling it and on behalf of the person who's buying it. That's why they are accountable for rugs. But if you're looking on eBay and stuff, you can always send me an email because I know a little bit about this, not a lot, but a little bit about this. And we can always look for each other. If you find something that's signed, person is, or you want to start collecting that person, always a good idea to post it in our group on Facebook or talk about it here, because someone else might know. But yeah, it being signed without knowing the house that it came out of is the only provenance that you get. So it is important. In terms of value, it's fatally important. So he had this funny party at his house, and he had this beautiful blue glass Mexican goblet that he got on his travels, and somebody at the party broke it. And instead of lamenting the loss of this beautiful goblet, he turned it into a dinner bell. This is where the stem broke off, right? He loves his wire. He does all his mobile and stay-bile stuff with wire. He wires it up. He puts on broken glass that he finds maybe broken from other things, and he creates this dinner bell. And him and his family, Sandra and Louisa, use this dinner bell every day, apparently. Not just for fancy occasions or special occasions. They used it to call each other to dinner. They rang it all the time. So he ended up tinkering with that and turning it into something that they loved, that they looked at every day. Now, this next thing I'm going to show you is something he made in 1952. It is a toilet paper holder. It is made with sheet metal and wire that he just had laying around from his stay-biles and mobiles. Calder built his mother a house in the backyard of the Roxbury property after his father passed away, so he could keep a closer eye on her, make sure she was right there with him. Now, Calder's dad was a sculptor, and his mother was a painter, right? So nothing comes from nothing. But they were all very close. And he built this little house for his mother. And before she moved in, he built this article that I'm about to show you, and he physically attached it to the windowsill. So it was immovable. And it is a toilet paper holder, and I will show you what this looks like. I think this is so cute. Looks like a bottom of a candlestick. And I mean, maybe this means nothing to you, but putting this together with his mobiles, with his rugs, with the person who he was, this is so interesting to me. It was attached to the windowsill, and this is where you would put the little roll of toilet paper, of course. He did other projects around the house, which were crazy. This 1942 thing is the last thing I have to show you. If you look at that website by Jessica, what was it? Help me out. That was a rough one. Jessica, Oh, I have to rewind back for it. That was a hard name to remember. Something Flinger. Sorry, I won't. I'm not even going to do that. I could get in trouble. Look at the article because it shows a lot of his stuff that he makes. But this is something he made in 1942. It's a toaster. It's made from wire, wood, metal, plaster, nails, screws. It's an ingenious toaster. He basically took a toaster apart and took out the parts that he thought were not necessary, put in some extra parts he thought were helpful, and you would literally put the bread right here, right? Looks like there's a pita bread or something in there now. But this is his toaster. And you know what? It worked. So again, a man who tinkered with everything, who was interested in every kind of medium. We're interested in our hooking, our quilting, our knitting. We put it all together too. He was interested in everything too. And he was also a philanthropist. I just love the story about how in 1972 he helped out the people of Guatemala and Nicaragua, giving them the supplies, giving them the licensing for free to do his rugs. And who cares what problems it caused later for rich people who wanted to buy the rugs later? Who cares about that part? It solved a lot of problems at the time. He's just a wonderful person. And again, he is under copyright. But this is an example how with your hooking, with your tufting gun, with anything that you're working on in 2021, look at who's out there. Just get on the internet, take some time, look at who's out there, get inspired. If you're a complete beginner, think about Calder as a starting point. He's just a shape-driven thing, like the things that he did that his wife hooked for him. Really easy to get in on entry level doing something similar to that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I've always wanted to do something with Calder because, like I said, I helped at this school a few years ago when Teddy was in kindergarten there. I was real close with the art teacher, and we did this whole segment on Calder, and I built, maybe I can find the pictures to show you. One of them was out in the front lawn here, a cat that was a complete reproduction of Calder's and the same size and everything, which is probably naughty, just like the music thing, but I did it. Nothing happened. And I'm sure Calder wouldn't have cared if I had his cat out on the front lawn anyway. Everybody enjoyed it for the years that it was out there. I think it's in the garage now. But anyway, look for things that inspire you. Look for people that inspire you. Whether it's a painter or a sculptor or a quilter or whatever, look for it, find it, and just get going. Just get going. Make a toaster out of wire. Make your hooked rug out of whatever you have. And the thing is to do it, right? That's the thing. So let's see. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Different episode. I will see you on January 1st. We will start the new year together. Actually, January 1st is a cocktail night, isn't it? It's not a coffee time. I will see you in the evening of January 1st. I will see you for cocktail night on January 1st. We will celebrate the new year together, and I will have so many ideas for you when that comes. And in the meantime, be busy, be happy, stay busy, and stay with me. I will be back. I'm going to post the pincushion today, and I will get the Amish pattern up probably tomorrow. So you can look for both of those. Those will both be beautiful, and they're great for beginners. Have a happy New Year's Eve. Be safe, be smart about what you do, where you go. Be thinking, be inspired, and I will see you on January 1st. We're going to start off the new year together. Take care. Have a great day.